Thank you for that nice kirtan, Krishna. Thanks to all of you for coming out. Sunday afternoon, Spanish for you. Address, website for more information. Everything is inspired by the teachings of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is the founder of Acharya Veda National Society for Krishna Consciousness. Om Magyara Chimarandasya Vinandanasa Jantosudu Viditam Vina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yen Bhutale Swayam Rupakaramyam Terati Swaparantikam. Our topic today is beyond believing. If you want to become a better version of yourself, it's important to realize that you need to do more than just believe for it, hope for it, pray for it. You need to show God, or Krishna is our name for God, that you really mean business. And the way you do that is you put actions behind your faith. It's not to say it's not important to believe, or to hope, or to pray, but we do have to take it a step further. Start expecting great things from God, making plans, expecting good breaks, open doors, stepping out in faith, talking and acting. Once a woman learns that she's pregnant, she starts to make all kinds of preparations, even though there are no signs of her pregnancy. Her belly hasn't started to come out. She hasn't put on any weight. There's no sign of the baby. She can't see him. She hasn't touched him. And yet, having faith in the doctor's report, she starts getting excited. More than that, she's probably buying baby clothes, getting the baby's room ready, arranging time off from work for the delivery, maybe even putting money aside for a college fund. What that is putting action alongside of the faith. So all of us, if we're alive, if we have a pulse, we do have things we're believing for. Maybe you want to overcome an illness, or maybe you want to get out of debt, meet that boy or girl of your dreams, start that mission, found that chariot. Well, here's the key. Go beyond believing. Put action behind your faith. If you're planning on getting well, then you need to start eating better and exercising. If you'd like to see your marriage restored, you need to start treating your spouse better. I heard it said that if you want your wife to treat you like a king, then maybe you should start treating her like a queen. If you want to start a temple in somewhere where there's no temple, then maybe you need to start a Facebook page group, or get a Sunday feast going in someone's home, or rent a storefront. My Bobby and I, we were in the Los Angeles Temple for 10 years, where I was the life membership director. And in order to facilitate my job as actually coalescing the Indian community in the Southern California area, I rented a radio, I rented an hour a week time from a radio station in Pasadena. From 8 a.m. until 2 p.m. every Saturday, the Indian community had time blocked out. There was a show by a travel agency, there was a show by a grocery store, and we had for $1,000 a month. I had an hour slot every Saturday, and that went on for 2 years, 1980, 1981. It was very successful. Our membership program expanded greatly in the LA area, but after 2 years of doing that, I began to think that for that same $1,000 a month, maybe we could cover the mortgage on a smaller, more rural radio station. Now, that was the beginning of a dream, but I didn't just leave it there. I didn't just hope, believe, dream, and pray. I took steps. Every week for a year, I would go to the library, to the magazine section, pick up a copy of Broadcast Weekly, and look in the classified sections under Radio Studio behind our life membership offices. We made half-hour episodic shows on the epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. We invited devotees in to act out the parts and read the narrations. Bhai Bobby was in charge of all the music and the sound effects. A lot of devotees go through the LA temple. So we would invite them into the studio for an interview, talk about philosophy. I would ask them to tell me the story of how they came to Krishna consciousness. Now, just like a woman preparing for a baby, we were getting ready for a radio station. There was no sign of it. We didn't have any money for it. We didn't have any prospects. But when that dream took hold, we started developing the programming, developing the experience, developing the connection, developing the resources. And guess what? As we started stepping out in faith, all those doors opened one after another. And we could practically see God taking a greater role in our life. For every step we took in faith, Krishna would take a step towards us and supply another piece of the puzzle. In 1981, we were able to put a small down payment on an AM radio station. The tower's right over there with 5 acres of land here in Spanish Fork, Utah. That was in 1981 and still is the only business format in the United States. Been broadcasting the sounds of transcendence for 45 years. Recent internet technology has made those transmissions accessible anywhere in the world where you have either cell or Wi-Fi connection. Not only that, but in 1987 we were able to build a log, 3,500 square foot log residence and temple. We started our Sunday feasts, 5 o'clock every Sunday since 1987. And then in 1991, this additional 8.5 acres became available next door. Now, rests on that very same piece of land and attracts about 50 to 60,000 visitors a year. I'm up here to tell you, God is great. I'm reminded of that saying. This may not be the shortest poem in the English language, but it's one of the shorter ones. Whoso takes a step towards God through doubting's dim, God will advance a mile in blazing light to him. What I believe is that Krishna had all this planned out since the beginning of time. He had all the stepping stones lined up before we were born. We just had to do our part and take our little tiny baby steps of faith before those dreams became a reality. In a purport to a verse in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada writes, quote, "The plans of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are understood by His mercy, and the plans of His devotees are as good as His plans." In other words, devotees are instrument for God to fulfill His purposes in this world. Prabhupada goes on to say that one should follow such plans and be victorious over the struggle for existence. Now, would you agree with me that too often we're believing for good things from God, and yet with our actions, we're doing just the opposite? Now, the thing is, your faith will work either positively, it'll work negatively as well. It'll work for good, it'll work for evil who plan to get the flu. Have you ever heard anyone at the grocery store say, well, it's flu season, I better pick up some of this flu medicine, I'll surely get it this year. They're talking as if it's bound to happen, and guess what? A couple of weeks later, their faith worked, but in the wrong direction. They expected the flu, they talked about the flu, they got medicine for the flu, they planned for the flu, and they were not disappointed, they got the flu. So remember, your faith will work in either direction. If we read the news enough, the doom and gloom, watch all the studies, follow each and every war that's taking place over the face of the globe, the Democrats versus the Republicans, we're going to talk yourself into having high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart disease, diabetes, all sorts of ailments. You know what they say, right? 1 in 4 persons get cancer. Well, maybe that's true, but let's count ourselves among the 3 out of 4 that don't get cancer instead of the 1 in 4 that does get it. I think it's just as easy to believe for the positive as it is for the negative. So our proposal is make plans to start living a long, healthy, God-centered life. And we've all heard people talking about my arthritis, my blood pressure, my sickness. Stop taking ownership of your problem. Stop inviting it into the in-law apartment. Rather, make plans to solve it, to evict it, get it out of your life. Our attitude should be, this sickness didn't come to stay, it came to pass. Exactly. We need to say things like, I know with long life, Krishna is going to bless me and my family. I'm going to declare by faith, I'm getting better day by day in every way. I heard about a man who was on both of his, that he'd be lucky to ever walk again. And he would certainly never run. The man was initially very disappointed. He spent 3 months in the hospital. But the first thing he did when he got discharged, he took out a membership in a health club. He wasn't able to go to the health club for 6 months, but he bought a membership in the health club. He was too weak, but yet he made up his mind that he wasn't going to just sit back and plan on spending his life in a wheelchair. He was going to plan to be up, to be walking again. Now, that was more than 5 years ago. Today, that young man can outrun both you and me. He defied the odds. But what happened there? He started making plans to rise above that injury. He could have acted like most people and just let the doctor's negative words sink in, convincing him to give up, settle for mediocrity. Instead, he believed in a supernatural God who can make anything possible, and with God as his partner and well-wisher, he started making plans to get fully recovered. In fact, to come out of that injury better off, more healthy, more active than he had been before. So maybe, just maybe, actually it's a certainty, that you've had negative things happen to you, you've had negative comments spoken over you. Our encouragement today is not to let the negative take root. Keep believing, flip the script, and plan for new things. And remember this point. Faith is always in the now. Get up every morning. Krishna, I thank you that right now you're working in my life. I thank you that right now I'm getting better. I thank you that right now. Impossible as it may seem, you have an amazing plan for my life. I'm 78 years old, and at this stage in my life, it would be sticking my head in the sand. I would be in denial if I didn't admit that my various bodily parts don't work as well as they did when I was 28. I don't hear as well as I used to. I don't see as well as I used to. I can still get down on the floor and offer obeisances when I come to the temple. That I can do that just as quickly as I did when I was 20. But to get back up again, that's like a whole 10-minute process, step at a time. Sometimes I'm not even sure I'm going to make it. But in spite of that, I'm not going to make plans to get old and crappy, grumpy, bent over, crotchety, and not being able to do anything. I'm going to keep my faith out there. I'm going to speak words of health, vibrancy, healing over myself. I'm going to count upon Krishna, God, to give me a long, productive, fruitful life, and then I'm going to put some actions behind it. I'm not going to make plans for defeat, and I would encourage you not to do the same. Everybody around us, they may be old, they may be cranky, they may be complaining that this part of their body doesn't work or that part of their body is failing. A healthy life full of service to the Lord and going out with a bang. I love preaching, and I want to continue preaching till the day I die. I don't want to retire, get put on a shelf somewhere. I don't want to have a stroke and struggle as an invalid for the last years of my life. I don't want to be incapacitated. I don't ever want to come to a place where I'm not able to preach. I want to go out with a bang, in the heat of battle, if you will. Strong, productive, right up until the day I pop off, kick the bucket, so to speak. I want to be excited and energetic and ready for the next challenge. I want to pass away suddenly, gloriously, not languish away slowly in a retirement home somewhere. Now, it's easy to think at this stage of life that the law of entropy is setting in. Everything is moving towards disintegration. My body is debilitating. It's part of getting older. It's inevitable. Old age is to celebrate a life fruitfully and happily lived, and to look forward to an even brighter future. Not, oh, I can't see, I can't hear, I'm all cranky. Someone asked me how I am, and I spend a half an hour telling them all the details of my latest surgery. No, I'm not going to fall into that trap, especially not the cranky part. We've got plenty of people that populate the cranky department. I don't have to join that. It's already full. I want to fight the good fight until the last hour, until such time as Krishna calls me home. Prabhupada says, do everything you have to do, but do it not with greed, do it not with false ego, do it not with lust, not with envy, but with love, compassion, humility, and devotion. No matter what your age, and we have all ages here represented in this room today, my word for you is that Krishna has important plans for you to fulfill at every stage of your life. For none of you is his purpose to take up space, breathe oxygen, pass time. He wants every one of you to travel your life's journey. To make plans to live every day joyfully, vibrantly, alive, healthy, and productive. In his comments to a verse in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada advises, quote, the best plan you can make is to surrender to Krishna or God's plan. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Dhamma Parityagya, give up all your self-centered plans and surrender unto me. Make a plan to be an instrument, to be a devotee. Bow down before me, worship me, and offer obeisances for me. This is God's plan for our life. So as far as possible, accept that open-heartedly, to put actions behind that belief, and to make that good news available to all other people. And when you make your plans, our encouragement is to coordinate them with the plans of the person who created you, who created the universe. Make sure that your plan is in sync with God's plan. Don't come up with a concocted, manufactured, self-centered plan. Be guided by the plans of the creator of the universe. And never get old. Old is a state of mind. Your body may age, but that's not to say that your spirit can't be young. When your spirit is young, when you get up every morning full of excitement and joy for serving the Lord, that helps your body to stay young also. Being always grateful, always happy, always in a good mood. This is the best anti-aging formula. Make plans to live out your life joyfully, wholesomely, vibrantly, and good health. So take inventory today. What are you planning for? Are you planning for sickness? Are you planning for health? Are you planning to barely get by? Are you planning to be blessed? To stay where you are, or to rise higher and accomplish your dreams? Now, according to our actions, our faith or our lack of faith, our action or our lack of action, all of us are making plans for something. So don't plan for a future of sickness, scarcity, failure. Plan, prepare, put action behind your belief. Prepare for success, prepare for abundance, prepare for victory, prepare for a long, fruitful life, prepare for good health. Get your faith going in the right direction. Start making plans for blessed, prosperous, healthy, joy-filled, abundant, long life. If you do this, I promise that Krishna or God will do more for you and your family than you could ask, think, or even imagine. He will open the vaults of heaven and pour out his blessings and favor on you in this life, and in the next life, he'll take you back to home, back to God. Thank you for your kind attention. If you received the message, you're invited to raise your hand. Joshua's been here before. He had his hands up before I even said anything. And we can all say together, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. You're welcome to stand and join us in the front of the room while we do this traditional ceremony called Arti ceremony. I'm going to lead it. And then you announce it, and we'll go downstairs for a wonderful vegetarian feast.
Krishna